Hello traders and investors, this is New Thought Crypto. You know me as a TA and a trader, which is this channel's primary focus. However, because we are so focused on trading Bitcoin, we somehow get so immersed in the minute price fluctuations that we lose sight of the Bitcoin vision and how Bitcoin can and will solve many problems the world is facing. This series is called Bitcoin Geopolitics, and it will deal with extreme scenarios that can happen in the world and how Bitcoin could serve as a solution, or at the very least, a solution to you and me, the holders, and the people that at the end of the day are not responsible for solving the world's problem, but we are accountable to protect and nourish our families. I am not an expert on geopolitics and I don't presume to be one. I intend to open a discussion. We are a community of like minded people, and I'm counting on you to offer your input and correct me if you think I am wrong. Before we address Bitcoin and the Second American Civil War, which is the theme of this video, I want to ask a question. Could it be that the United States of America is not so united, and in fact it is already in a civil war? Well, it depends on who you ask and your definition of a civil war, and we'll get to that in a minute. But for example, do you consider the protests following the death of George Floyd a civil war? It depends on your perspective and political bias. It could be argued that violent protests that lasted almost 3 years involved mass demonstrations, property destructions, and clashes with law enforcement are a civil war. Or maybe do you consider the January 6th Capitol protest a civil war? Undoubtedly, at least some members of Congress, the media, and the public believe it to be an insurrection, at the very least. My point is that public perception of events depends on political leanings, and the partisan divide prevents public discussion and mutual agreement on the rules of the game. Okay? Now, my view is that the BLM protests and the January 6th protests were not an actual civil war. However, I consider both events a precursor to the civil war. Before we go deeper into this discussion, let's define what a civil war is. A civil war is a conflict fought within a country between organized groups. The struggle entails significant violence. The objectives of a civil war is to gain political control over the populace and the state institutions. A civil war impairs the state's sovereignty. It can last for a long time, and it has a severe impact on civilians to a degree that they cannot lead their everyday lives. How likely is a second American Civil War? Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask members of the American public, they certainly think it is likely. A survey released in May of 2024 found that 47% of Americans thought it was likely or very likely that there would be another civil war in their lifetime. If you go by popular research, for example, The Fourth Turning, Neil Howe highlights secular cycles and their effects. Howe doesn't explicitly say it, but judging by his book and public statements on various podcasts, he thinks a full-blown civil war is not out of the question. Now, I could go on and on about it, but if I am making this video, you know that my opinion is that a second American Civil War is possible, and the common theme is that the current political and economic system isn't working. The degree of dissatisfaction inside the US is such that it has to be resolved, and the chances of a peaceable solution are medium to low. What could set off a second American Civil War? Actually, there is no shortage of factors. Let's begin with the political polarization, because The divide isn't just about policy disagreements. It touches on fundamental values, on identity, and the vision for America's future. And the political process in the United States cannot resolve these differences of opinion. Second issue is election disputes. Many members of the American public have absolutely no trust in the process of elections. Economic and social inequality, and not just between African Americans and white people, or between African Americans and Asian people. I think that the most vilified demographic in the United States is white men, especially young white men. I remember a TikTok poll asking women, who would you prefer to meet on a trail, a bear or a man? The majority of the women answered that they prefer to meet a bear. Now, in a society that vilifies men just based on their gender and their skin color, what do you think could be the outcome? Now, these racial and cultural tensions, they were, at least in my opinion, they were created on purpose by the American elites with the intention to divide and conquer the American people. However, I think it's going to backfire, and backfire hard. Another issue is government overreach and collapse in trust, okay? Because the American people no longer believe in their institutions. The Democrats feel that the Supreme Court is serving the Republican administration, and the Republicans in the United States think that President Trump is being wrongfully prosecuted. There is simply no trust in the government's institutions. External influence is not a big thing in my opinion, because the American people are doing a fine job by themselves. They don't need outside intervention to hate each other or to feel divided. However, it cannot be ruled out. Militarization of civilian groups is also a factor. I think personally that the Second Amendment is a good thing. However, it's a double-edged sword. Climate change is also an issue, and I don't mean the objective issue of climate change. I mean that some members of the American public believe climate change to be a hoax, a complete hoax, and the other part thinks that climate change is the biggest threat of their lifetime. And how can you resolve these differences? Another issue is the legal system, okay? Because I think that the judiciary and the prosecution in the United States have absolutely no credibility at all. Personally, I consider President Trump to be wrongfully prosecuted. Your take may be different, but I think that when the legal system is going after one man and changing the rules to fit the outcome, nothing good can come out of it. And just imagine what would happen if Judge Merchan in New York now sentences President Donald Trump to do prison time. It's not going to end well. What would be the economic implications of a second American Civil War? First and foremost, wealth evaporation. If a civil war begins, you will be reduced to the tangible assets that you have directly under your control. The Bitcoin you have in your wallet, the gold that you have in your safe, the tuna and beans that you have in your pantry, and the real estate that you are personally occupying. Anything else will not be yours anymore. Second is strategic resource scarcity, essential resources, and I mean water, food, and power. They would become critical strategic assets, and those that control the distribution of water, food, and power, they will come out ahead of the other groups competing for control. Of course, infrastructure and industry, or shall we say, what infrastructure, what industry? Okay, because the best case scenario, there will be extensive infrastructure damage as a result of neglect, not to say sabotage, okay? Of course, agriculture will become very hard, maybe not impossible, but very hard. But the distribution of agricultural products will be next to impossible. I'm not even talking about the global economic impact because the majority of the countries in the world they owe their debts in United States dollars, okay? And they hold United States bonds. What happens if there is no United States anymore? Just imagine complete portfolios will get evaporated. There will be nothing, okay? Of course, that the United States will not be able to pay, even if it wants to pay, it will not be able to pay its debts. And even if it does pay the debts, who is holding uh, who is holding a currency of a country in a civil war? There will be capital flights. If you are a businessman, you will have no possibility of insuring your business. Of course, that your costs will skyrocket, and there will be capital flight and human migration, but the other way around. Instead of migrating from Mexico to the United States, people that have the possibility, especially rich people, will migrate from the United States to Mexico and maybe to other countries in the South and Central America. Okay, so it's going to be bleak. You are going to be left out without any social programs, without Medicare, without Medicaid, without Social Security. The only security you will have is the security your family and community provides. Okay? How would an American Civil War impact the cryptocurrency industry? I think the main two influences is that crypto, in general, even I'm talking about Bitcoin, but it will be crypto in general, it will become a safe haven asset because it is out of the direct control of governments or factions within the government. And this will be the time that Bitcoin will truly become digital gold because it is a potential store of value, especially in times of severe domestic instability like a civil war, because traditional financial systems and the value of fiat currencies could plummet due to loss of confidence, the economic disruption, and potential hyperinflation. Okay? However, it will not be as smooth as you might think because there will be increased volatility. Currently, we are trading Bitcoin against the US dollars. But what happens when the US dollar collapses? We will need to trade Bitcoin against maybe a different stable coin, maybe a commodity backed stable coin, maybe against gold, and there will be a lot of volatility until Bitcoin will find the right path. There will be capital control and financial restrictions. The government or factions within the government will try and take control of your cryptocurrency, especially if you're holding it on American exchanges and ETFs. There will be a global economic impact for sure because a civil war in the US would have global ramifications, potentially destabilizing the global markets, and Bitcoin could be a global hedge against this uncertainty and thereby increasing its international demand. Now, there is a technological concern or an infrastructure concern because for cryptocurrency to work properly, you need an internet connection. If there will be no internet, there will be no cryptocurrency. Okay? So, overall, in times of instability, in times of upheaval, cryptocurrency could not only survive, it could also prosper. But just imagine that Bitcoin will be worth $1 million, but a can of beans will be worth $100. So it's not all as rosy as you might think. Bitcoin has many advantages in a conflict zone. The first and foremost is decentralization and accessibility, because Bitcoin operates without a central authority, which means it's not subject to government control or restrictions that might be imposed during conflicts. This allows individuals to access their funds regardless of their political or economic situation. It's a borderless transaction. Bitcoin can be sent and received anywhere as long as you have internet access, and this is particularly useful in conflict zones where traditional banking might be, at the very least, disrupted or probably inaccessible. It will allow for the transfer of value across borders without interference. Bitcoin will give you financial sovereignty. Individuals have complete control over their Bitcoin. This means this self-custody means that people can carry their wealth in their minds. You just need to remember 12 words and you can go with at least the majority of your wealth across borders, and no one can stop you. It is resistant to censorship. Transactions cannot be, at least cannot be easily blocked. They cannot be reversed by a single entity, which is crucial when governments or other entities might attempt to control or confiscate wealth. Of course, it is an inflation hedge. We already talked about it. It allows for a rapid transfer of value. It allows you security and anonymity. Yes, your transactions are recorded on the blockchain, but not every wallet has a name. Of course, it could be a mean of receiving global support and donations. It doesn't matter if it's to individuals or to organizations. So, as you can see, Bitcoin has many advantages in a conflict zone. So, just to conclude, I know that what I'm saying sounds extreme or maybe scary, but this is the whole purpose of Bitcoin and geopolitics, is to discuss all these extreme cases and to discuss how Bitcoin and cryptocurrency generally can help humanity at large, but mainly individuals, lead better lives, safer lives, and how we can, no matter what happens, take care of ourselves and our families. If you have anything to add, or if you have any criticism or suggestions, please leave them in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.